When someone is murdered, the most likely perpetrator is an adult male. On rare occasions, an adult female is responsible. Even rarer and almost unthinkable, a child is the culprit. Perhaps the most infamous of these is the horrific case of James Bulger, a 2-year-old British toddler who was tortured and murdered by two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and Jon Venables, in a crime that shocked the world. We have covered that case in depth in the past, so in this video we are going to look at 5 other notorious murders that were committed by children. In 2007, the world was shocked by a series of brutal murders that occurred in a small village of Mushihari in the Indian state of Bihar. The perpetrator of these heinous crimes was an 8-year-old local boy named Amarjeet Sada. From a young age, Amarjeet displayed signs of aggression and often lashed out at others, though the reason for his behaviour was unclear. He was somewhat of a loner, finding enjoyment in climbing trees and playing by himself. The situation worsened in 2006 with the birth of his baby sister, which meant even less food for the already struggling family. In 2007, one of his aunts came to visit. She had recently found a job in the city and had asked Amarjeet's parents to look after her child until she settled in. Soon after the aunt left, Amarjeet's mother went to the local market to buy vegetables, leaving her son in charge of his 6-month-old cousin and another infant. The child was sleeping peacefully in its crib when something evil stirred within Amarjeet, and he began pinching the baby to make him cry. The more the infant cried, the more Amarjeet felt the need to inflict more pain, until eventually he put his hands around the baby's neck and squeezed as hard as he could, taking pleasure in the sound of the child crying and struggling to breathe. He kept squeezing until the baby was dead. He then proceeded to bury the body under a blanket of grass behind his house and returned home as if nothing happened. Later, he confessed to his mother what he had done, but instead of reporting it, she chose to keep it a secret, only telling Amarjeet's father, who physically punished him for the act and concocted a story for the aunt. They could never have known what their son would do next. One night, while his parents slept, Amarjeet strangled his 8-month-old sister. Again, his parents were aware of his crime, but chose not to report it. His third and final victim was Khushbu, a 6-month-old baby girl belonging to a neighbour. The child's mother, Chanjan Devi, reported to the police that she had left her daughter at a primary school, and when she returned a short while later, the baby was gone. A local search was launched, and a few hours later, Amarjeet reportedly admitted to strangling the girl and hitting her with a brick. He then led searchers to the place where he had buried her. The police arrested Amarjeet, and during questioning, Inspector Shatrughan Kumar, the officer in charge, asked him if he had killed Khushbu. The boy calmly replied, "Give me a packet of biscuits and I will tell you." He later admitted to also killing his sister and cousin. A psychologist who interviewed Amarjeet described him as a sadist who derives pleasure from inflicting injuries. Despite his undeniable guilt, under Indian law, a child cannot be sent to prison. Instead, he was placed in a secure children's home in the town of Munga, where he stayed until he turned 16 years old and was released. Today, Amarjeet would be around 27 years old, and his current whereabouts is unknown. Since his release, some reports suggest that he was adopted by a childless couple and given a new identity, while others claim he returned to his family and continues to live in their village. To show that kids who kill is not a modern-day phenomenon, we will look at a child murderer from the 1800s who to this day remains one of the cruelest and sadistic juvenile killers of all time. Jesse Pomeroy was born on November 29, 1859 in Charlestown, Massachusetts, to Thomas and Ruth Pomeroy. He was the second of their two sons. When Jesse was just 12 years old, he attacked and beat a 7-year-old boy named Tracy Hayden from Chelsea and left him for dead on Powderhorn Hill. A couple of months later, on May 20th, 1872, 8-year-old Robert Meyer was also assaulted and found in an abandoned outhouse in Chelsea. Again, Jesse was responsible. On July 22nd, Johnny Balch was discovered tied up and beaten in an abandoned outhouse in Powderhorn Hill. Thankfully, all 3 children survived their injuries, but the community was horrified when it was revealed that an as-yet unknown child was responsible for all 3 brutal attacks by what the papers described as a fiendish boy. Shortly after the Johnny Balch attack, Ruth Pomeroy and her children moved away from the Chelsea area and settled in the South Boston area. By now, Ruth was a single mother after Thomas walked out on the family. It was no coincidence that soon after moving into their new home, 7-year-old George Pratt was found badly beaten by local fishermen in South Boston. A month later, on September the 11th, another 7-year-old boy, Joseph Kennedy, was assaulted after being lured to a vacant boathouse, where he was beaten and cut with a pocket knife. Just 6 days later, on September 17th, railway workers discovered 5-year-old Robert Gold tied to a telegraph post near the tracks, beaten and slashed with a knife. After the last attack, Jesse happened to be passing a police station in South Boston and looked through the window, not knowing that Joseph Kennedy, the boy assaulted on September the 11th, was inside and recognized Jesse as his attacker. Officers soon arrested young Jesse, who readily admitted to being the boy torturer. On September the 21st, 1872, 13-year-old Pomeroy was arraigned before a juvenile court judge for the attacks he admitted to and was sentenced to 6 years at the State Reform School for Boys in Westboro, Massachusetts. But less than 2 years later, 14-year-old Jesse was paroled to his mother and brother in South Boston. It was no coincidence that a month after Jesse arrived home, a 10-year-old girl named Katie Curran went missing. Soon after, on April the 22nd, 1874, the mutilated body of a 4-year-old boy, Horace Millen, was found in Dorchester Bay. Although there was no direct evidence against him, Jesse became the prime suspect in both cases. Eventually, Katie Curran's body was discovered concealed in Jesse's mother's dress shop. As a result, he was arrested and charged with both murders. During his trial, the Attorney General sought a first-degree murder conviction, and on December 10, 1874, Jesse was found guilty and was sentenced to death by hanging. However, Governor William Gaston refused to sign the death warrant, and after 3 votes by the Massachusetts Governor's Council, his sentence was commuted to life in solitary confinement. At 16 years and 9 months old, Jesse was transferred to Charleston State Prison. While there, he made numerous escape attempts. In 1917, with assistance from District Attorney Joseph Pelletier, his sentence was adjusted, allowing him certain privileges, and Jesse eventually adapted to prison life. By 1929, he was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane, where he died on September 29, 1932, aged 73. Mary Bell was born in 1957 and lived with her mother in Newcastle upon Tyne in northeast England. According to relatives, Mary was an unwanted and neglected child, and her mother, who worked as a prostitute, often left her alone. The identity of Mary's biological father is unknown. Mary's home life had taken its toll on her, and she became noticeably withdrawn and manipulative. On May 25, 1968, when Mary was just 10 years old, she strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown to death in an abandoned house in Scotswood, England. His body was later discovered by 2 boys. Investigators were baffled, as beside a little blood, there were no signs of violence. There was, however, an empty bottle of painkillers on the floor near his body, and police concluded he died after taking the pills, and his death was ruled as an accident. After Martin's death, Mary started acting strangely. She even turned up on the doorstep of his parents' house, asking to see his body in the coffin. Shortly after this incident, Mary and her friend Norma broke into a nursery school and vandalized it with notes, taking responsibility for Martin's death and promising to kill again. Mary was also telling her classmates that she had killed Martin. However, because she had a reputation as a show-off and a liar, no one believed her. Seemingly to make them take notice, just 2 months after killing Martin, Mary and Norma strangled 3-year-old Brian Howe. If that wasn't bad enough, Mary mutilated his body with a pair of scissors and carved the letter M onto his torso using a razor blade. Again, Mary acted strangely after Brian's murder and was spotted lurking outside his house and laughing and rubbing her hands together when she saw his coffin. Mary and Norma had already been interviewed about Martin's death, but were called back for a second time after Brian was murdered. In the interview, Mary implicated herself by saying that she had seen a boy with Brian carrying scissors. The fact that Brian had been mutilated with scissors was only known to the investigators and the killer. Both Norma and Mary were charged with the murders of Brian and Martin, and a trial date was set. The jury found Mary Bell guilty of manslaughter, not murder, due to her displaying classic symptoms of psychopathy. Norma, seen as an unwilling accomplice, was acquitted. The judge sentenced Mary to be imprisoned at Her Majesty's pleasure, which denotes an indeterminate sentence in British law. To this day, Mary Bell is known as Britain's youngest female killer. Mary was released from custody in 1980 at the age of 23, and she was granted anonymity for life, which has been extended to protect the identities of her daughter and granddaughter. Since her release, she has lived at unknown locations under various pseudonyms. Alyssa Bustamante was a troubled young girl who lived with her grandparents in St. Martin's, Missouri, who had taken custody of her and her 3 siblings in 2002 because their mother was a drug addict and their father was in prison. Not surprisingly, Alyssa had struggled with her disruptive childhood and as a teenager suffered with depression, and in 2007 she was hospitalized for attempting suicide. Alyssa lived 4 doors down from 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton, and on the evening of October the 21st, 2009, 15-year-old Alyssa sent her young sister around the Alton's house to ask Elizabeth out to play in the woods. After Elizabeth failed to return home that evening, her mother called the police and reported her missing. After a brief police search, the girl's body was found buried in a shallow grave in woodland behind her house. She had been stabbed, strangled, and had her throat cut. It was established that 2 graves had been dug, several days before Elizabeth was murdered, and written evidence at the crime scene led them to Alyssa. After studying Alyssa's social media accounts, police found references to her wanting to know what it was like to kill someone. In a diary recovered from her home, Alyssa had written, "I just effing killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now. Lol." After killing Elizabeth, Alyssa had calmly headed off to a youth dance at her church. Alyssa was soon arrested, and with her grandmother present, she eventually admitted to the murder.
Let's start at the beginning. Is this something that was planned out, or was this just an accident?
It was an accident.
Okay. Well, this is a starting point then. That's kind of what I thought.
I went in the forest. Like I said, wasn't there.
Do you have an extra one for her? Yes. Elizabeth was there in the forest?
Yes.
Was she alone?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know what to do.
They will know all of that from the autopsy. So we need to know the truth, because at the end of the autopsy, they will know exactly how she died. So we need to know now the full truth, full disclosure right now, so it doesn't come out later that, well, Alyssa wasn't telling the full truth again. We need to have it all come out now. How did you kill her?
I didn't. She died.
How did she die? 9-year-old girls don't just die.
We were messing around. And she fell back and hit her head.
Was her throat cut?
Yeah. Oh.
Grandma?
Oh my God.
I'm not going to ask any questions right now until we get.
Alyssa was indicted and pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder and armed criminal action after agreeing a plea deal. She received a life sentence with the possibility of conditional release in 2024 for the murder charge, along with a consecutive 30-year sentence for the armed criminal action. In 2024, Bustamante was granted a controversial parole hearing due to Senate Bill 26, which allowed juvenile offenders to seek earlier parole. While this bill didn't apply to first-degree murder convictions, it did not prevent her from seeking parole for her second-degree murder charge. However, Senate Bill 754 later amended this, blocking parole for second-degree murder as well. Although Governor Mike Parson did not sign this bill in time to prevent Alyssa's hearing, she was ultimately denied parole. If she were granted parole, which is unlikely, her earliest possible release is in 2059, when she will be 65 years old. A waste of 2 lives, just because one of them wanted to know what it was like to kill someone. This crime is wrong on so many levels, and at the root of it was a 12-year-old girl having a relationship with a 23-year-old man. 12-year-old Jasmine Richardson lived with her parents, Deborah and Jean-Marc, and her 8-year-old brother, Tyler, in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. Life hadn't been easy for Deborah and Jean-Marc. They were both recovering drug addicts and at times struggled to pay the bills, but since their move to Alberta, things seemed to have settled down. Jasmine was a happy and studious girl with many friends. However, her increasing use of the internet, particularly her fascination with goth subculture and friendships with older men, concerned her parents. Things escalated in 2005 when Jasmine began breaking school rules and dressing in goth clothing. This, combined with her inappropriate posts online, led to bitter arguments with her parents. Things got even worse in 2006 when 12-year-old Jasmine got close to 23-year-old Jeremy Stank and eventually embarked on a relationship with him. Her parents tried everything they could to stop their daughter from seeing Stank. But Jasmine became increasingly defiant and began sneaking out of the house to meet him in secret, and often talked about the idea of running away from home due to the oppression she felt from her parents. Her relationship with her younger brother had also deteriorated, and he reportedly grew afraid of her. It wasn't just her parents who disapproved of her boyfriend. Her friends also expressed concern about the age difference between them. Due to Jasmine being grounded several times by her parents, Jasmine and Stank communicated online and started talking about a way to get rid of her parents, to free Jasmine from their rules. At one point, Jasmine messaged Stank, callously saying, "So, I have this plan. It begins with me killing them, and it ends with me living with you." Friends of the pair were aware of the couple's plans and had even been asked to assist in the killings. On April the 23rd, 2006, Stank, who was drunk and high on drugs, entered the Richardson family home through a basement window Jasmine had left open for him. Deborah heard a noise in the basement and went to investigate. When she was confronted by Stank, who launched a frenzied attack on her with a knife, her screams alerted Jean-Marc, and armed with a screwdriver, he managed to stab Stank in the eye. However, he was eventually overpowered by the younger man and stabbed to death. His last words were reportedly to ask Stank why he was doing this. Stank replied, "Because it's what your daughter wanted." 8-year-old Tyler was still in his bedroom when he was stabbed multiple times and his throat slit. Investigators found evidence that he had fought valiantly against his attacker, and the little boy had utilized his toy lightsaber to try and defend himself. There is debate about who stabbed Tyler, with the possibility it may have been Jasmine. It was later revealed that Tyler was murdered because in Jasmine's eyes he was too emotionally sensitive to be orphaned, so had to die as well. After the murders, Stank drove away in his truck. Jasmine stayed in the house long enough to clean the knife off and steal her mother's purse before using her credit card to pay for a taxi to Stank's trailer. Later, the two went to a house party where they were observed laughing and joking as if nothing had happened. At one point, Stank blurted out that he had killed his girlfriend's family, stating that he gutted them like fish, with Jasmine adding, "My little brother gargled." After leaving the party with friends, the pair were eventually apprehended in a convenience store in nearby Leader, Saskatchewan. The trial of Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Stank captured national attention due to the shocking nature of the crime. Under Canadian law, because Jasmine was a minor, she was tried in the juvenile justice system and sentenced to a maximum of 10 years in custody, followed by 4 years of community supervision. In contrast, 23-year-old Jeremy Stank was tried as an adult. His trial revealed their twisted relationship and shared violent fantasies. In 2008, he was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and received 3 life sentences without parole for 25 years. During the trial, both attempted to minimize their involvement, blaming each other for the murders. Jasmine's defense argued that she was heavily influenced by Stank, but evidence showed she actively participated in planning and executing the crime. Jasmine, now using a different name, was released in 2016 after completing her sentence. Reactions to her release were mixed. Some believed she deserved a fresh start, while others felt she should not have been released due to the nature of her crime. Her whereabouts is unknown. Stank remains in prison and will likely stay there for the rest of his life.